Good morning or good afternoon, whenever you're watching this video, of course, colleagues, staff, and whoever decided to watch this video. And welcome to our presentation on reading difficulties, disabilities, and dyslexia, supporting our middle school students. Now, understand that the information that I'm providing to you today is just that, informative. The idea of this presentation is not to test your knowledge, but to give ideas onto what might help support the classroom. Thusly, don't expect any kind of test or additional follow-up outside of being informed for this session. Now, why would you want to watch this video? Well, we're going to spend about 20 minutes exploring reading difficulties, disabilities, and dyslexia, topics that directly impact many of our middle school students. You see, as educators, understanding these challenges is crucial for creating an inclusive environment where students can succeed. So let's dive into what we need to know to better help and support our learners and our readers. The areas of focus here, you can be expected to be presented with information regarding these 5 content areas. It's reasonable to assume that you may have already had basic fundamental understanding of these topics. With that in mind, consider this as a refresher or a supplement to that understanding. Now, if you are a teacher who is less seasoned, you might find some of this information to be extra insightful on your teaching journey. Understanding reading disabilities and dyslexia. Let's look at some essential terms or some of our basic terminology that we need to understand. Now, notice I didn't use the word vocabulary here because you use the word vocabulary when you are setting the foundation for the words. In other words, you are learning and building up your use of words. When we get to adults and study of more andragogy or andragogy, depending on how you want to pronounce it, basically you get terms or terminology. So let's take a look at some of these. A reading disability is a persistent difficulty with reading that occurs despite adequate instruction and normal intelligence. Dyslexia is the most common reading disability as it affects approximately 15 to 20% of the population. Approximately 80 to 90% of students with learning disabilities are estimated to have dyslexia. That's in accordance with an article by Yale Center for Dyslexia and Creativity. Dyslexia is characterized by difficulties with accurate and fluent word recognition, poor spelling, and decoding capabilities. It's crucial to understand that dyslexia isn't about intelligence. It's about how the brain processes language. Students with dyslexia often have strengths in creative thinking, problem solving, and visual spatial skills. Reading disabilities manifest themselves in different ways. You have something called phonological dyslexia, which affects the student's ability to decode words. They struggle to sound out unfamiliar words. Then you have orthographic or surface dyslexia. This impacts sight word recognitions. So students may read yacht as yacht, if you will. So ya with the CH, not reading it as the whole yacht, but with the CH there. I hope you caught that. Mixed dyslexia combines both of these individual challenges. In our middle school classrooms, it's good to be aware of these things. You might notice students who read slowly, avoid reading aloud, have difficulty with spelling despite knowing the content, or show a significant gap between oral and written expression abilities. While the exact cause of dyslexia is complex, it's not fully understood. Research suggests it's primarily due to differences in how the brain processes language, particularly in the areas related to reading and spelling. Thusly, we consider it neurobiological. You see, brain imaging reveals that students with dyslexia use different neural pathways when reading. There's also a strong genetic component here. So if a parent has dyslexia, there's a 40 to 60% chance their child will too. This isn't about vision problems or intelligence. It's about how the brain processes written language. Here we're going to look at multi-tiered support systems. Now, if you haven't heard the term MTSS before, it basically means a multi-tiered systems of supports. Now, Tier 1 means that you're providing high-quality core instruction for all students and providing a little additional support where needed for all those students. Now, if a student is not showing growth despite the teaching, they are moved to a Tier 2 for more targeted intervention. And then, of course, Tier 3 provides intensive support for students with the most needs. Now, you see over here the percentage of students that are usually affected by these tiers. Now, if you haven't seen this triangle before, sometimes you'll see it like this, or sometimes you'll see it inverted, representing and backwards, where Tier 1 is up top, because we read down as opposed to up, but basically, it's the same concept. And then, of course, sometimes you'll see behavior and then academic on this triangle. And this doesn't go just for reading. This MTSS works for many subject areas and many content areas. Now, effective assessment drives instruction. All right, so what do we do to assess the students' needs regarding their ability to read, or maybe where they're struggling with? Well, we got to do some screening. It's kind of like universal screeners that help identify students who might be at risk. And then, of course, once the screening is done, you go through the diagnostic process where you dive deeper to understand the specific areas or the specific difficulties that the student is having. And then, of course, you got to progress monitor, or monitor what's been done after any kind of interventions have been implemented, and see if the outcomes are going towards achievement, or if the student is indeed growing. Now, for middle school students, this might mean using tools like reading fluency probes or comprehension assessments, or maybe even understanding where the student might need additional support. Now, problem-solving approaches ensures that we are making data-driven decisions. All right, data is important. We can't just assume and just throw mud at the wall and say, okay, there it is, we got mud on the wall. Sometimes it needs to be a little bit more strategic. Okay, so we need to clearly identify the problem. With a wall, is there a gap that requires mud because there's a line there? In regards to reading, we need to be more specific into the reasons why the student can't read, okay, or is having an ability, or is having a difficulty with that reading. When we analyze why this is happening, we can then target the interventions continuously and then continue to evaluate whether or not it's working. This process helps avoid guessing and ensures that the right supports are being provided for the student. Evidence-based instruction. Evidence-based instruction means using teaching methods that research has proven effective. This isn't about following trends. It's about using strategies that have been rigorously tested and shown to work for students with reading difficulties. Now, of course, some strategies are more effective than others, but that's a discussion for another day. For our middle school students with reading challenges, this might mean using explicit phonics instruction, teaching comprehension strategies directly, or using a multisensory approach that engages multiple learning pathways. Matching instructions to students' needs requires an understanding of each student's specific strengths and challenges. A 7th grader reading at a 4th grade level needs different support than one who reads fluently but struggles with comprehension. We must be willing to adjust our content and methods based on a student's response to interventions. If a strategy isn't working after sufficient time and intensity, we need to try something different or assess if the strategy is being performed or implemented with fidelity. And flexibility, of course, is crucial for student success. Now, what does that word fidelity mean? That means, is the strategy being implemented as it is intended to be by those that designed the strategy? In other words, are you following the rules, and is the student following the rules and going through as it is written in the strategy or the strategical process? Structured literacy provides a comprehensive framework for teaching reading. It addresses 6 key elements systematically. And here's a list of our 6 key elements. We got phonology. Phonology helps students understand how sounds work in language. Phonology is broken down into individual phonemes. These are the basic units of sound that differentiate words and change their meaning in a language. Then you have sound symbol association. These connect sounds with letters. Now, in the English language, that could be especially difficult. Example, consider the past tense of the words, or past tense of verbs written with an ed at the end. They may associate with a t or a t sound with words like jumped or stopped, but have a harder D sound in words like played or allowed. We also have syllable instruction. This helps students break down longer words. It's important to know it's important to know that the syllables are different than phonemes. In other words, phonemes are the individual sounds, but syllables are the individual syllable. So the word syllable, they have syll as one syllable, lub as the other syllable, and then bull as the final syllable. Try saying that 5 times fast. Morphology teaches students about prefixes, suffixes, and root words, crucial for middle school vocabulary development. And of course, we have syntax. The syntax addresses grammar and sentence structure, while semantics focus on the meaning itself. The principles of structured literacy are as important as the content. Explicit instructions mean we directly teach concepts rather than expecting the students to figure them out. Systematic instruction follows a logical sequence, but we cannot skip the steps. Cumulative instruction builds on reviewing learning, constantly reviewing and reinforcing earlier skills. Sometimes you might hear the term scaffolding. And then, of course, you have multisensory approaches, which engage the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic pathways. And, of course, diagnostic teaching means that we are constantly assessing and adjusting based off of students' responses. Now, specific strategies can make a huge difference for students with reading difficulties. Example, we can break complex tasks into more manageable steps. You can provide multiple opportunities to practice new skills. Graphic organizers are especially helpful in supporting reading comprehension, and then you can teach decoding strategies explicitly rather than assuming that students will pick them up naturally. Remember, the objective is to incorporate student interests and strength. A student passionate about sports might be more motivated to read a challenging text about athletics. Let's look at universal design and assistive technology. Universal design for learning benefits all students, not just those with disability. UDL provides multiple ways to present information visually, auditorily, and tactilely. It offers various ways to engage students and recognizes that motivation varies student to student. This allows students to show what they know in multiple ways. For students with reading difficulties, this might mean providing audio versions of text, allowing oral responses instead of written ones, or using technology tools to support reading and writing. Assistive technology can be a game changer for students with reading disabilities. You got text to speech software that helps students access grade level content where they maybe couldn't read it by themselves. You got word prediction programs that support writing by suggesting words as the student types. Think of that like predictive text when you're texting on your phone. You got digital graphic organizers to help students organize their thoughts. You got audiobooks to provide access to literature and content areas for texts. And of course, you have voice-to-text applications. These help students get their ideas down without struggling with the spelling or the mechanics of the writing process. Assistive technology works best when integrated with evidence-based practices. Assistive technology should supplement, not replace good instruction. In other words, it is a supplement, okay? Students need training to use the tools effectively. So we must ensure that we match the individual student's needs and regularly evaluate their effectiveness. Remember, the goal is to create skill development, okay? Assistive technology should help students access learning while we continue to build on their reading abilities. On this slide, we have a summary of key ideas presented during this video. We learned that reading disabilities are neurobiological differences that affect how students process language. They are not about intelligence or effort. Early identification and evidence-based interventions can make a tremendous difference in student outcomes. We have powerful tools like structured literacy approaches, assistive technology, and universal design principles to help every student to succeed. Our job is to ensure every student shows learning growth. This means that all students have access to grade level content while we build on their reading skills. So thank you so much for your attention and your commitment to the learning growth of our students. It will be interesting to share ideas and stories and to maybe even hear about those from each other about how we can improve in the classroom. Now, if you are interested in additional information, there are several different resources you can pull from. I went ahead and listed them there. And of course, don't be afraid or don't hesitate to go to your local instructional coach. In other words, if you have one on your campus or your educational support team, as they often have training specifically designed for meeting the students' reading needs. I wanted to leave this presentation with a quote. It's a little bit more advanced in its ideas, but it really speaks to the power of teaching our students to read. It's from C.S. Lewis, The Reading Life, The Joy of Seeing New Worlds Through Others' Eyes. Literary experience heals the wound without undermining the privilege of individuality. There are mass emotions which heal the wound, but they destroy the privilege. In them, our separate selves are pooled and we sink back into sub-individuality. But in reading great literature, I become 1,000 men, yet remain myself. Like the night sky in a Greek poem, I see with a myriad of eyes, but it is still I who see. Here, as in worship, in love, in moral action, and in knowing, I transcend myself and am never more myself than when I do. Thank you again for your time.